It's just dinner with my ex, relax. So I relaxed and hired movers. She came back to an empty apartment. She said, it's just dinner with my ex, relax. And for reasons that now feel embarrassing to admit, I actually tried to relax. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. There was something in the way she said it, too light, too casual, like a waitress asking if I wanted extra napkins. Not defensive, not nervous, not even slightly annoyed that I questioned it. Just polite. And polite, when it came from her, was always a red flag. So while she put on her makeup and hummed to herself in the bathroom, I sat on the edge of our bed scrolling through absolutely nothing on my phone, refreshing apps I didn't care about, pretending I wasn't imagining every possible worst-case scenario. She came out in a dress she hadn't worn in months, black, fitted, the one she once said felt too date night-ish. She asked me how she looked, and I gave her a thumbs up like a toddler who'd been handed a juice box. She laughed, kissed my forehead, and left. The door clicked shut with the softest little sound, and I swear it felt louder than a gunshot. For a while I just sat there, waiting for some rush of trust or courage or whatever supposedly keeps couples sane. Instead, I got a growing, buzzing, electric sense of certainty. Not anger, not jealousy, something quieter and heavier. Like the final puzzle piece sliding into place after months of looking at the picture upside down. We've been drifting for a long time. She drifting outward, me drifting inward. She was all unfinished wine glasses on the counter late night, just catching up with an old friend, and vague promises to talk later. I was all swallowed arguments, overthinking and pretending things were normal. If our relationship had been a houseplant, it would have been one of those crispy brown ones she kept forgetting to water, but swore she'd revive next week. Anyway, there I was, alone, overthinking myself into a migraine. Her first text came 40 minutes later, running a bit late. He wanted to catch up longer. That was it. That was the sentence that broke me. Not the dinner itself, not the dress, not the lip gloss she'd accidentally started wearing again the moment he moved back to town. It was that stupid, simple message. Something about the tone, the calmness, the easy assumption that I'd just be here when she got back. She didn't mean it cruelly. She wasn't that type of person. But sometimes indifference slices deeper than outright betrayal. I glanced around the apartment, my guitar in the corner collecting dust because she hated when I played it after 9 p.m. The 3 mismatched throw pillows she insisted were aesthetic, even though they felt like concrete. The plants she kept killing and replacing so I wouldn't notice, even though the trash can kept revealing the evidence. Our photos, her smiling wide, me smiling smaller like I was slowly shrinking next to her. And I swear the whole place looked different. Not wrong, just not mine. So I stood up, opened my laptop, and typed, "Same day movers near me." The website loaded with the speed of destiny. I didn't hesitate. I didn't make a pro-con list. I didn't ask myself if I was being emotional. My hands moved like they'd been waiting for this moment for months. Pick up tonight. Time, as soon as possible. Destination, a storage unit and a friend's guest room. I pressed confirm and felt a strange wave of relief wash over me. Not triumph, not spite, just relief. Like unclenching a fist I didn't realize I'd been holding. 30 minutes later, the movers knocked. They were 3 big guys who looked like they could lift a refrigerator with one arm and their regrets with the other. I opened the door and said something like, "Take everything that looks like it belongs to a man who's done pretending to be okay." They didn't blink. They just nodded and got to work. It was weirdly therapeutic watching them pack. Every box they taped shut felt like a chapter closing. Every empty shelf felt like a clearer version of myself emerging. I didn't take everything, just the things that were actually mine. Clothes, books, my old guitar, the TV she always said was too big and aggressive for the living room, as if a TV could have anger issues. I left the little things that were half hers, the decorations she bought without asking, the furniture she chose while insisting she'd consider my opinion next time. 2 hours later, the place looked like an Airbnb someone had forgotten to decorate. Bare walls, dust outlines where furniture used to be, silence. And I stood in the middle of it all, strangely calm. I didn't leave immediately. Some part of me wanted to say goodbye to the space, or maybe to the person I'd been inside it. I walked from room to room, touching the empty countertops, running my hand along the wall where she once taped up birthday decorations for me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't anything dramatic enough for a movie. I just felt done, finished in a quiet, inevitable way. She came home around midnight. I heard the jingle of her keys, the small metallic sound that once made me feel warm and now just made my stomach tighten. The door opened, and she stepped into the empty living room. She froze. "Hello," she called out like maybe it was playing a prank or hiding behind a couch that no longer existed. I stepped out from the hallway, hands in my pockets, heart weirdly steady. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to make sense of what she was seeing or not seeing. The missing TV, the empty shelves, the absence of my guitar, my books, my things that used to fill the space like background noise. She looked at me, confusion twisting slowly into something sharper. What happened? Where is everything?" I opened my mouth to answer, but her phone buzzed. She glanced down. She shouldn't have, but she did, and her face changed. That's where I'll stop for now. Her face changed in an instant, confusion melting into alarm, like she'd opened her phone expecting a weather alert and found a confession instead. Her eyes flicked from the screen to the empty apartment, then to me, then back to the screen again. Whatever message she'd received, it didn't help her case. "Did you seriously move out?" she finally asked, her voice sharp around the edges, like she couldn't decide whether to be angry or scared. I leaned against the doorframe. "I didn't think you'd want to come home to a stranger's furniture." "That's not funny," she snapped, stepping further inside. Her heels clicked against the bare floors, the sound echoing unnaturally in the hollow space. "Where is everything? What did you do?" "I moved," I said simply. "I guess it's obvious." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Without even talking to me? Without a conversation? "Are you insane?" And here's the part one need Reddit to understand. She wasn't shocked because she cared. She was shocked because my leaving wasn't part of her script. She'd planned to keep drifting while I orbit around her like a loyal satellite. She wasn't used to me making unpredictable moves, let alone ones that involved a moving truck. I shrugged. "You were busy tonight." She flinched. A small, careful flinch. The kind you learn to hide after years of pretending everything is fine. "I told you it was just dinner," she said quietly. "I told you to relax." "And I did," I said. "That was the problem." She looked around again, like maybe if she stared hard enough, the furniture would return out of embarrassment. "This is insane," she repeated, but it sounded less certain now. I watched her, the way she hugged her purse to her chest like a shield. For months, I had tried to figure out whether I was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive, too suspicious, too insecure. But standing in that stripped-down apartment, I saw the truth clearly. The relationship had been collapsing quietly while she pretended everything was fine and I pretended not to notice. She stepped closer. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" "You already left," I said. "You've been leaving for a long time." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't disagree. She paced a few steps, her heels tapping rapidly like she was typing angry texts with her feet. "Okay, you know what? Sit down. Let's talk. We're both emotional right now." "We don't have anywhere to sit," I pointed out. "Which is fitting." "Stop it," she hissed. "This isn't a joke." "I'm not joking." There was a long pause. One of those pauses so heavy it changes the oxygen in the room. Then, finally, she asked the question I've been waiting for. "Why now?" Because that was the real story, wasn't it? Not the dinner. Not the text. Not even the ex. The real story was all the little moments that piled up into something unbearable. I took a deep breath. "Do you remember last month, when you said you needed space and went to stay with your sister?" She nodded slowly. "You didn't stay with your sister." Her eyes widened, not in guilt, more in disbelief that I knew. "I didn't follow you," I added. "But your sister called about her birthday gift, and she mentioned she hadn't seen you in weeks." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "But I let it go," I continued, "because I didn't want to fight. Then a week later, you accidentally left your phone in the kitchen, and your ex messaged you something like, 'Same time tomorrow?' And you said it was just about finishing some old conversation." She swallowed hard. "And again, I let it go." She looked away at that, turning her head slightly so her hair fell like a curtain between us. But tonight, I said, when you texted me that he wanted to catch up longer, I realized I wasn't jealous. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I just felt done. Empty. Detached. Like I'd already left the relationship, and I was just waiting for my body to catch up. She finally looked at me fully. So that's it? You're ending us because I had dinner. It's not the dinner. It's everything before the dinner. It's everything after. It's the way you talk to me. The way you stop talking to me. The way you exist next to me, but not with me. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither was staying. She pressed her lips together, the kind of tight press people do when they're holding back either tears or insults. I had seen her do both enough times to know it could go either way. Finally, she said, I didn't sleep with him. I nodded. Okay. You don't believe me? I believe it doesn't matter. Her breath hitched like I'd slapped her. You don't care? I care enough not to turn this into a war, I said. But no, I don't care in the way you mean. Because somewhere along the line, I stopped being afraid of losing you. I started being afraid of losing myself. She let out a shaky exhale and lowered herself onto the floor, sitting cross-legged in the middle of the empty living room like a kid at a sleepover. I don't understand how we got here, she said. I swear I don't. That's the problem, I said softly. You never saw it, and you never told me. I did. You just didn't hear me. She buried her face in her hands for a moment, then looked up with red eyes. Are you really leaving? For real. Already left, I said. I just came back to say goodbye. A silence settled between us. Not angry, not tense. Just sad, quiet, honest in a way our relationship hadn't been in a long time. Then she asked the last thing I expected. Can we at least talk like humans? Not like enemies. And somehow, despite everything, I nodded. So we sat there on the wooden floor of our empty apartment at 1 a.m, the two of us surrounded by the fading outline of a life we'd tried to build but didn't know how to maintain. She told her version of the story. I told mine. We were both wrong in places. We were both right in others. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't an apology. It was more like two people finally seeing the same truth from different angles. But the night wasn't over yet, because after we talked ourselves into exhaustion, she said something I didn't expect, something that changed the tone of the entire room. Before you go, she whispered, there's something I need to tell you. And the way her voice shook, I knew it wasn't going to be something simple. Before you go, she whispered, there's something I need to tell you. The way she said it made every hair on my arm stand up. It wasn't dramatic or manipulative. It was small, fragile, almost frightened, like she was holding something sharp and didn't know how to put it down without cutting herself. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She pulled her knees to her chest, arms wrapped around them, as if shrinking might make the confession easier. The apartment was silent enough that I could hear the faint hum of the streetlights outside. Funny, I'd never noticed that sound before. Maybe the noise of our relationship had drowned it out. She inhaled shakily. I didn't stay with my sister. You already know that. I nodded. And I didn't just see my ex tonight, she continued. You know that too. I didn't nod this time. I didn't react at all. I think she wanted some sort of signal, some hint of how much it hurt me, but there was nothing left to hurt. I felt like an old bruise someone kept pressing. She looked at me, then looked away again. It wasn't an affair, she said. We didn't do anything. I swear. She paused, eyes unfocused. But I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I stayed quiet. She kept talking. I didn't go to him because I wanted him back. I didn't even go because I wanted to leave you. I went because I didn't know who I was anymore, and he's someone who saw me before all of this, before I felt like I was drowning in my own life. She wiped her cheek, annoyed that she was crying. I told myself it was harmless. Just talking, just catching up. But then I realized I liked how I felt around him, and that terrified me. So I lied. About the sister thing. About how often we talked. About where I was. But I didn't cheat. Not in the physical sense. A long pause. But in every other sense? I guess I did. Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything I thought I should feel. The truth was simple. She was telling me something I'd already known. Why are you telling me this now? I asked softly. Because you're leaving, she said. And I can't let you leave thinking I didn't care. I cared too much. I just cared in all the wrong ways. She let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. I wanted you to chase me, you know? Isn't that pathetic? I wanted you to get jealous. I wanted you to fight for me. I wanted to feel chosen. But every time you stayed calm, every time you said okay, or we'll talk later, I felt like I mattered less. So I kept pushing, and somewhere along the way, I pushed myself off the edge. I closed my eyes for a moment, not because I was hurt, but because her honesty arrived too late to be useful. When did you start feeling like this? I asked. She gave a sad smile. Long before I admitted it. Maybe a year ago. Maybe even earlier. I kept pretending everything was fine because I didn't want to blow up our life. You were safe. You were steady. You were predictable. And I thought that meant I loved you. She shook her head. But safety isn't love. And comfort isn't happiness. I sat down across from her, not close enough to touch, but close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. So what did you want? I wanted us to be brave, she said. But I was only brave when I was doing something wrong. Another tear rolled down her cheek, and she let it fall. When you moved out tonight, I realized something. You were the brave one, not me. You did the thing I should have done months ago. I didn't know what to say to that. There are some moments where words feel stupid and clumsy, like wearing winter boots to a ballet. She looked at me with this hollow, honest expression. I didn't want to fall out of love with you. I try not to, but love isn't something you can force, and I kept pretending it was. Then she said something that actually did sting. And I think you fell out of love with me too. I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I said. I think I did. Not in one moment. Not in a dramatic explosion. More like erosion. Slow, steady, invisible until the coastline was gone. She nodded like she'd expected it, but it still hurt to hear. We sat in silence for a while. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time works weirdly in the middle of emotional disasters. The apartment felt like a ghost of itself, all empty corners and memories we hadn't packed. Finally, she spoke again, quieter than before. There's something else. Of course there was. She swallowed hard. He told me tonight that he's moving to another city. A big job offer. He just found out. And when he said it, I felt relieved. I raised an eyebrow. Relieved? Yes, she said firmly. Relieved. Because if he stayed, I might have ruined everything. I might have done something I couldn't take back. I think some part of me was waiting for him to leave, so I didn't have to decide anything. I know how cowardly that sounds. It sounds human, I said. She shook her head. No, it sounds selfish. For the first time all night, I reached out and placed a hand on the floor between us, not touching her, just close enough for her to know she wasn't alone in the room, even if we were no longer together. What now? She whispered. I think now we stop pretending, I said. And then we figure out who we are when we're not trying to fix something that's been broken forever. She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I don't want us to hate each other. We don't have to, I said. But we also don't have to stay. She laughed through her tears, a soft, messy laugh. God, how do we get so far from each other while living in the same apartment? Quietly, I said, in all the small ways. She leaned back on her hands, staring up at the ceiling like it might offer an answer. Do you think we could have saved this? If we tried earlier? I thought about it. I really did. No, I said. I think we were too busy pretending it wasn't falling apart. She absorbed it like a hit to the ribs, painful but also clarifying. The clock on her phone blinked 2:07 a.m. I don't want you to leave like this, she whispered. I don't want to stay like this, I replied. She closed her eyes, nodding slowly. Acceptance, or something close to it. But then, because life always has one more twist, her phone buzzed again. Same name, same contact, her ex. She stared at the notification for a long moment. Then she turned the phone face down on the floor. I'm not answering, she said. Not tonight. Her voice was steady, too steady. And just like that, I realized our night wasn't over. Not even close. She placed the phone face down on the floor, so gently it was almost ceremonial, like she was burying something, or bracing for it to come alive again. I watched her do it. Watched the way her fingers hovered a second too long over the screen, as if tempted to flip it back. But she didn't. She exhaled, long, controlled, almost rehearsed. and looked at me with the kind of steadiness people force when they're afraid to fall apart. "I'm not answering," she repeated. "Not tonight." It should have meant something to me. It should have stirred something, relief, hope, closure, anything. Instead, all I felt was distance, like she was standing on one side of a glass wall, and I was on the other, watching her try to convince both of us that she still had choices to make. I shifted slightly on the floor. "You don't have to explain yourself to me anymore," I said. "We're past that." "I know," she whispered, eyes dropping to her hands. "That's what scares me." For the first time since she walked through the door earlier that night, she seemed genuinely uncertain. Not defensive, not manipulative, not ashamed. Just lost. And, as much as I wanted to detach and stay cold, a part of me couldn't ignore the years we had spent together. You don't stop caring overnight, even when leaving is the right thing. She wrapped her arms around her knees again and leaned forward. "Can I ask you something? And can you promise to be honest?" "I've been honest all night." She nodded. "Right. Okay." She swallowed, gathering courage. "If I hadn't lied, if I hadn't drifted, if I had actually talked to you, instead of running away into old memories, do you think we could have worked? Do you think we could have saved it?" It wasn't a trap. I could tell. She wasn't asking to guilt me or rewrite history. She was asking because she needed to understand herself, maybe for the first time in months. So I answered her truthfully. "No," I said. "We were breaking long before any of this happened. You leaving for him didn't cause the end. It just made it visible." She flinched, but she didn't argue. "When did you realize it?" she asked quietly. "The night you told me you felt lonely next to me." I hadn't brought that up in months. Not because I forgot it, because I remembered it too clearly. Her eyes widened. "I didn't mean that. I said it because I was angry and—" "You meant it," I said softly. Maybe not the way it sounded, but you meant the feeling behind it. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence settled between us, thick but not hostile. More like grief sitting politely at the table. Suddenly, she pushed herself up from the floor and went to stand near the window. The city lights washed over her in a soft, cold glow. She crossed her arms, then let them fall, then crossed them again like she didn't know where to put her own limbs. "You know what I hate most?" she said, still facing the glass. "That I'm the villain in this." "You're not the villain," I replied. She laughed bitterly. "Come on." I lied. I hid things. I ran to another man because I didn't know how to fix what was happening here. If this was a movie, I'd be the character people throw popcorn at. Real life isn't a movie, I said. There are no clean villains. No clean heroes. We both messed up, just in different ways. She turned around, leaning back against the window. "Where did you mess up?" I met her eyes. I stayed too long after I stopped being happy. I kept waiting for things to get better instead of admitting they weren't. That's on me. She studied me for a long moment, a sad understanding slowly settling on her face. "You really did stop loving me, didn't you?" I nodded once. It hurt to see how much that answer hurt her, but lying would have hurt worse. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor again, pulling her legs up to her chest. "I think I knew," she whispered. "I just didn't want it to be true." Neither of us spoke for a while. The apartment felt colder than before, like the emptiness was finally catching up with the reality between us. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You know, he asked me to move with him." I felt the words hit the air like a dropped glass. Not because I cared about him, but because it explained everything she hadn't said. "He asked you tonight?" I asked. She nodded. "Right before I came home. He said we should finally give a real shot. That we've always had this connection, and that he could see a future with me." And for a second, I thought about it. I swallowed, waiting. But then I realized something. She looked at me, eyes suddenly steady. "He doesn't love me. He loves a version of me that existed years ago. A version that doesn't fit anymore." And I think I was doing the same thing with him. Trying to relive something that's already dead. I let that sink in. It made sense. More sense than anything she'd said before. "So, I told him I couldn't go," she continued. "I told him I needed to figure myself out first." "And what did he say?" She gave a sad smile. "He said he'd wait. But I don't want him to." That surprised me. "You don't?" "No," she said. "Because if he waits, I'll feel obligated. And I'm tired of living in obligations." She drew a shaky breath. I don't want to run to someone else anymore. I don't want to fill the void with another relationship. I want to sit with myself for once. Really sit with myself. It was the most honest thing she'd said all night. So what do you want from me? I asked. She looked down. Nothing, she whispered. I want absolutely nothing from you. And that scares me because it means this is really over. It is, I said gently. But it doesn't have to be ugly. Her phone buzzed again on the floor, face down. I didn't need to see the screen. I already knew who it was. She stared at it for a long, trembling moment. Then she picked it up and blocked the number. Just like that. She set the phone aside and leaned her head back against the wall, tears pooling but not falling. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly. I'm so sorry for everything. For all the ways I made you small. For not being brave. For not loving you the way you needed. For making you doubt yourself. For all of it. I stayed still. Words felt too heavy to reach for. She continued anyway. I know apologies don't fix anything. I know they don't change the ending. But you deserve to hear it. I breathed in slowly. Thank you. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Are you leaving tonight? Yes, I said. I need to. That truth hung between us, final and real. She pushed herself up from the floor again, walked toward me, then stopped just close enough that I could see every emotion fighting behind her eyes. Can I hug you? She whispered. It took me a second. Maybe two. Yes, I said. She stepped into my arms and held on in a way she hadn't held me in months. Desperate, honest, trembling. And I held her too, not out of love, but out of respect for what we once had. When she finally let go, her eyes were swollen but calm. Promise me one thing, she said. Promise me you won't let this break you. I won't, I said. And you shouldn't let it break you either. She nodded. I'll try. I grabbed my bag, walked to the door, and opened it. But before I stepped out, she said one last thing, soft, almost afraid. There's something I haven't told you yet. And the tone of her voice told me that part 4 wasn't the real beginning of the end. Part 5 would be. There's something I haven't told you yet. Her voice stopped me mid-step, one hand already on the doorknob. It wasn't the kind of voice people use when they want to manipulate you into staying longer. It was quieter, heavier, almost defeated. I turned slowly. She stood barefoot in the middle of the empty living room, hair messy, makeup blurred, shoulders slumped like she was carrying invisible luggage, the kind that bruises from the inside. Is this about him? I asked cautiously. She shook her head. No, not about him. Not really. I waited. She wrung her hands together twice before she finally spoke. I wanted you to leave. I blinked. That wasn't what I expected. She took a tiny step toward me, then another, like approaching a wild animal she wasn't sure would bite. Not because I didn't love you. Not because I wanted someone else. But because I didn't know how to leave myself. I didn't know how to admit that the life we built didn't fit me anymore. She exhaled shakily. I didn't have the courage to walk away, so I kept pushing you, hoping you would. I stared at her. So this was intentional. Not consciously, she said quickly, but somewhere in the back of my mind, yes. I think I kept creating distance because I was hoping you'd be the one to end it. That way I wouldn't be the bad guy. And I hate that. I hate that part of myself so much. Her honesty landed like a punch I didn't see coming. You could have just talked to me, I said quietly. I know, she whispered, but talking means facing things. And I was too afraid of what I'd find. She moved past me, stopping near the doorway, like she needed to stand in the threshold to tell me the rest. There's something else, she continued, and this time her voice wasn't fragile. It was tired. Deep, bone-level tired. For months, I felt like I was disappearing. Like the version of me you fell in love with was gone, and I didn't know how to tell you I didn't want to be her anymore. She crossed her arms, then let them fall again. You fell in love with the soft parts of me, the easy parts, but I'm not soft anymore. I'm not easy. I'm angry. I'm confused. I'm restless. I want things I don't even understand yet. And I kept thinking if I tried to explain that to you, you'd think I was being dramatic or unstable or selfish. So instead of saying it out loud, I tried to sabotage the relationship just enough that you'd take the decision out of my hands. I rubbed my forehead. That's a lot. I know, she said, tears gathering again. I know. And none of this is your fault. Not a single part of it. It's all me trying to figure out how to grow without breaking everything. But I ended up breaking everything anyway. I leaned back against the wall, trying to process the confession that felt like the last puzzle piece in a picture I didn't even realize I'd been assembling. So why tell me this now? I asked. Because I don't want you walking away thinking you weren't enough, she said. You were enough. You were more than enough. I was the one who changed. I was the one who didn't know how to evolve inside the life we had. She paused, then added softly, and you deserve to leave with the truth, not just the mess. Her phone buzzed again on the floor. We both ignored it. She took a slow breath. I need you to understand something. I wasn't looking for him because I missed him. I was looking for someone who felt familiar when I no longer felt familiar to myself. He was a mirror of who I used to be. I kept going back to that mirror, hoping I'd see myself again. Did you? I asked. She shook her head. No. I saw someone pretending. The quiet between us stretched for a moment, long enough for me to hear a car passing outside, the hum of the street, the soft creak of the apartment's old flooring. It felt like the world was still moving, even as we stood frozen in our unraveling. I didn't want this to end like this, she whispered. Neither did I said. But endings rarely listen to what we want. She gave a sad little laugh. You always had a poetic way of putting things. I shrugged. Breakups bring out the inner poet, I guess. She stepped closer again, not to touch me, but to look directly into my eyes. Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. I don't. Why not? She asked, voice cracking. I hurt you. I lied. I ran away from us. I made you feel alone in your own home. Because you didn't do it to hurt me, I said. You did it because you didn't know how else to survive whatever you were feeling. A tear fell, and she didn't wipe it. She whispered, You always understood me more than I understood myself. That was the problem. You outgrew the version of me I was stuck in. I didn't argue. She exhaled shakily. What happens now? You figure yourself out, I said. And I figure myself out. And us? She asked, barely audible. There is no us. Not anymore. She closed her eyes at that. It wasn't dramatic. It was acceptance, finally arriving like a delayed train. When she opened them again, she said, Can I ask you one last thing? Sure. If we met again in a year, 2 years, 5, and we were different people, better people, do you think we could ever start over? I didn't answer right away. I thought about it. About who she was. About who I was. About everything that happened. About how endings aren't always permanent, but they're almost always necessary. Finally, I said, I don't know. And that's the honest truth. Maybe we'll meet again. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll love other people. Maybe we'll never speak again. But tonight, this is where our story ends. She nodded, tears falling silently now, each one a tiny surrender. I'll miss you, she whispered. I'll miss the good parts, I said gently. And I'll let the rest go. She didn't reach for me again. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She just nodded, stepped back, and whispered goodbye. I turned the doorknob and stepped into the hallway. The air outside felt different, lighter, colder, honest. Before the door closed behind me, I heard her say one final thing, so soft it barely reached me. Thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't answer. Some things aren't meant to be answered. I walked away, not angry, not broken, not victorious, just free. And that was the real ending. Of us. Of the apartment. Of a version of myself who stayed too long. And the beginning of something else entirely.